but also about the future, understanding this connection of a productive and predictable and sustainable ocean, maybe it's worth making this connection. So, William, would you please talk about the relations between climate changes and the ocean? Well, first of all, I would like to thank you very much for this eclectic debate. I do not know how to talk about economy. I just know how to talk about climate changes and climate as well. But I want to say that when I saw the opportunity of talking about that, I currently am in charge of the agricultural part of Climatempo. But one of the things that is very important is to bring climate changes on the basis of the reality that we live today, not only based on a governmental panel or it's something that we are going through already. We have studies, be it water, energy, infrastructure, agriculture. We have been analyzing a history, and we see a curve that we are already inserted in. And I myself, responsible for agribusiness, I am in charge of bringing this problematic to the society, and talk about how we should behave today, in addition to being concerned about the next harvest. We have, for example, a commitment to feed 10 billion people. So how can we increase our food production twofold? And how can I do that if I don't have productive areas? So this all goes through this environmental issues. So when we talk about climate, about seasonality, about climate phenomena, we cannot do that without talking about the oceans. Everybody here has already heard El Nino, So they are phenomena that are 100% connected to the relation with the ocean. When it's colder, the water becomes colder. When it's hotter, the water becomes warmer. So it affects all the system. We have floods, we have problems that impact on the global climate. So I brought some images. I don't know if I can show you right now, but I brought some slides just as a reference, and just for us to use as an argument in more technical terms. Initially, I brought this map that shows how complex the air circulation is in the oceans, like polar mass or cold fronts, cold spells. It's all connected to the ocean. Another thing are the hurricanes that impact the northern hemisphere. And when they happen, it's basically because of that black arrow that is on the equator moving towards the United States. That is the route that the hurricanes take. So this is just an example to show that it's pretty much connected, the atmosphere in which we live. So we measure the atmosphere, we have sensors, but the integration with the ocean in terms of modeling and prediction is core to consider the ocean conditions. We're talking about another ecosystem that includes all the oceans, not only the surface. They are kilometers and more kilometers. So, for example, I brought an example of La Nina. So, for example, this will be the third consecutive harvest of La Nina. So there were climate changes and the agriculture was impacted because of the temperature of the Pacific Ocean, so far away from us, but interfering a lot in our economy and in our local economy.
Here, just for you to see the history since 1950, the behavior of water temperature in Pacific. You see that there's no standard, and therefore the difficulty of knowing if in the next harvest, 23-24, or in the year of 23, I will have influence of El Nino or La Nina, if the ocean will be hotter or colder. There's no predictability, and this is our science. Follow up the situations. I have here two maps showing the effects of El Nino and La Nina. First, La Nina in global level. There are areas that become drier and areas wetter. So you leave a normal standard that in climatology would be the normal climate, and you start to have a deviation. For instance, in Brazil, we have a drier season, a drier time in the center south of Brazil. That's why it's difficult for the harvest, because the ocean water is colder. On the other hand, the effect of the El Nino, the whole planet suffers the influence of El Nino. It's the opposite of La Nina. No, it is much more complex of that. I don't have time to explain in detail for explaining details, but it is not very much complex. And well, I was talking a lot about Pacific, but the Atlantic for us has a major role. Notice that all these parameters, they correlate. When I have in the Atlantic Ocean a little warmer here in Brazil coastline, I increase rains and showers and storms. Much of the events in last summer was due to a warmer Atlantic Ocean. And I'm not even getting into the issue on how this will have an influence in fishery. I believe you know better than me. But basically, I want to show you that we have to understand much more the ocean and associate with our daily life and with climatology. This we're talking in the scale of time, but in the scale of climate, in the next decades we have a huge challenge to understand these relationships and be aware that yes, we are passing through a tipping point. I'm not getting into the moment, into the matter of climate changes here, because it's a whole other discussion. Maybe it is. I'm not discussing if it is anthropogenic or natural cycle or both combined, because since the industrial era, we are increasing the release of CO2 in the atmosphere and other greenhouse effect gases, and or maybe because we are just measuring the temperature in the oceans for less than 1 century and we don't understand that much. But maybe it is both things combined. But the point is we have to understand better our oceans. Thank you, William. And for no doubt, as according to the Intergovernmental Panel of Climate Change, there is no doubt that we are accelerating the process. And there's another element in this relationship with the flying rivers, because we have the ocean evaporation and the evapotranspiration of the rainforests that give back this moist to the atmosphere, and it is distributed by the continent in the continent. So this is the web of life, and it is all connected. It is important to say that it's not boxes that are fragmented, but all connected. So continuing, I would like now to invite Eduardo to, amidst so many variables and so much unpredictability that we have to deal with, I don't know if you know, we will now go through a very important debate, as Tawan talked about, and William as well. what are these variables that have to be considered. But we will have now a block about coast governance. What are the challenges of having the data, having the information, have the facts going on, and dealing with projections in public governance and private governance? And there's something really interesting. Santos is the first city to have planning to fight climate change. So I will take this opportunity that Pigtail and William talk and give the floor to Eduardo to talk about that, why Santos decided to do this climate change planning, and what does this mean in practice. This is a port city with a plan to fight climate change. How does this work in practice? How is this relation to blue economy? Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, Paulina and my dear colleagues here in the panel. Thank you for the initial talks by Tawan and William. And so how would this be? How do we understand this in the scope of municipal public management? How do we bring all that to the local sphere, which is the local realm where things really happen? As a city, Santos has no doubt, we notice that we are in a scenario of climate crisis. The storms, they are increasing, wind gusts and positive tides in this, they are more often. So this is due to the global warming and the way the ocean responds to it. We have all the diagnostics, analysis, studies. We work with the academia to increase the expertise of the municipality, the city hall, and more than 433,000 inhabitants of the city of Santos. They live in 3.4 square kilometers of the island. So the island is highly populated. But what does this bring in terms of heat comfort, permeability of the soil, with warmer ocean and an imbalance in fishing activities, in fisheries, the thawing of the ice caps in the poles, the difference of temperature make a displacement of the warm and cold currents, and also an increase in the current speed. So how do we consider this in Santos Master Plan? I know that in a certain area of the city, there's a high risk of the raising of the sea level, and if there's a lot of rain in the same day and a high tide, in a syzygious high tide, this will increase the event. And with the extreme events, waters will invade the urban infrastructure. But who invaded what? The urban infrastructure, due to anthropic intervention, invaded. Of course, there is the social, environmental, and economic growth, but we cannot fail to think that with that, we break the local dynamics. We no longer have the natural balance, and the water will invade, as example what we have here in the edge of the island that we call Ponta da Praia. So we have to consider in our master plan a prohibition for underground garages, underground parking. So this is an example on how this the updated plan that was called Climate Action Master Plan considers not only environmental analysis but also social and the local aspects to have the the biggest range of information for the decision makers, be the mayor, the secretaries, the city commission, the assembly, the NGOs. The more information we have, the more precise the information, the more we share it, the better. And that's why not only were we the first one, that is very nice, but it would be nice if it is applied in all cities with all stakeholders with the same understanding of the situation. And basically, we mention in the document, but not only in the climate action plan, but we also have a plan to recovery of the Atlantic rainforest. Paulina also mentioned this to plan a contingency for high tides and floods. We are working these issues as a government activity, not only one secretary or one sector isolated. Thank you. Thank you. We'll go back to that. And now I pass the floor to Fabiana, because when we talk about governance and coast governance, there is another important factor that is not only economy, which is transport, of having a projection, a design for a sector that is key. And I would like you to present the plan considering the sustainability of waterways in Brazil and how the blue economy is addressed in the sector. Good afternoon. Thank you, Paulina. Well, going back to what Tawan said, I think, well, blue economy is a topic that is started 10 years ago and could have been restricted to the academia for a long while, as happened to sustainable development that happened started in the 70s, and we took like 40 years to start discuss. Now we are in a panel, in an event that is taken the whole week, in the private initiative with the government, in the academia. So in the logic of governance of social environmental issues, I'm very happy to see that a topic that could be restricted to academic discussion gains such a projection, and we are here discussing for the whole week. Brazilian hydroways. What am I doing here in the panel of blue economy? Well, this is a navigation company in Brazil. We navigate the rivers of the Amazon, the Paraná-Paraguay rivers, and the port terminals. One of them is the port of Santos for coast navigation. So Brazil sees we take part of the economy as we look to the water bodies in Brazil, rivers or sea, as a way for transport, and a more sustainable one. Because when we put loads to be transported in coast navigation or river navigation, we gain a scale, especially, well, for instance, we transport solids mainly, but when we put a huge amount of load to be transported by a wagon and a set of boats, or in barges, in the case of coast navigation, we have a gain in sustainability and efficiency. The inventory of greenhouse effect gases of our company says that in comparing to railways and highways, our carbon equivalent emission is 4 times less. So this is a very sustainable way to transport major loads. And we see that as a major responsibility and opportunity for the industry. Why is this a major opportunity? Because I have an opportunity of business to promote, to improve Brazilian logistics. We see this in our economy, and responsibility because I depend on water bodies, rivers and sea to operate my business. I need to understand climate changes. So we have loads to transport. I transport mainly grain, fertilizers, so I depend completely in the issue of climate in the center of Brazil, and ores and metals that are also dependent on water resources and climate. So we see that in a very, we put a great focus on that. In Santos, we have a port terminal with one of the most modern installations in the point of view of environment sustainability. We have the first cranes in the port with less water, like the gantries, with less energy consumption. The gantries, which and the grabs that get the product from the ships and put in the terminal, they are airtight. So from the point of view of blue economy, we are talking about cranes here or gantries, because in our and Derek's and our understanding in the economy, in the social environmental issues, we understand that we do not do this alone. So the idea of the hidrovias is that all port operators and all the operators in the port of Santos get together, so we have joint actions. So will we all have the same type of gantries? There are a series of actions and studies and social environmental actions that can be carried out together. In our understanding, this governance, together with the municipality and the academia, may be more effective, not only to mitigate the impact, but to restore in the environment. And then we talk directly and immediately with green economy associated to fishery stocks, to fishing stocks, the preservation of marine fauna, and so on and so forth. Okay, there's a lot. Thank you, Fabiana. I don't know if you noticed in the beginning when we started this dialogue of ocean culture, it seems that they were distant areas, but now with this with Fabiana's talk, we understand that the idea is to have this flow, so we understand that everything is connected. In coast governance, we are not only talking about investments and economy, but also provisions, projections, everything related to a preserved and productive ocean. Tawan, back to you. We have a major challenge. You said it very well in the opening of this panel, that this is a new term, but as we heard from Eduardo, William, and Fabiana, in the productive sector, in private sector and governance itself, it's urgent to assimilate this notion. How to bring this to the private investment and the society, so that the society see, we say, this dialogue of ocean culture, putting our blue glasses to see our reality. How to bring this, considering this urgency, this emergency that we are living today. Okay, I will answer, and I will take this opportunity because during my colleagues' talks, I took some notes. And when I say that it's a new term, the blue economy, well, it has just 10 years old, so it is a new child. But academically speaking, the first publication in the world regarding this topic is from 1958. It is not even in the area of economy, but oceanography. And I do this link because yesterday in the afternoon there was a debate in one of the panels about the need of humanizing the discussion of ocean, and so bringing social sciences, human sciences, gender, racial issues. These agendas cannot be absent. Traditionally, the studies that work with ocean are oceanography, biology, physics, chemistry, the hard sciences, naval engineering, and we see less we see the different areas now getting in and collaborating the environmental, economy, social, gender, and so on and so forth. So, although the term blue economy is new, this discussion, academically speaking, has some decades already. Nevertheless, and I believe that in the 21st century, we see the urgency of doing something to deal with these major challenges. And recovering what Eduardo said, although we are dealing with a global topic, we have to act locally. There is a concept that is, we cannot treat these topics isolated. No, it is a global agenda. It requires collective international efforts, but this requires to act locally and regionally. And to do so, we have to call governments, private sector, academia, the civil society, and work in schools with education. Education is extremely important because when we talk about the ocean literacy, oftentimes they seem too far away from the common citizen. Climate change, El Niño, La Niña. How does this affect my daily life? A lot of people do not know. So it is very important that in the context of the ocean decade, show society, and communication is key here. We have a representative here to, it is key to communicate. Communicate means doing the best effort in our areas to detail and to make easier and broader and bring society together with us. So yes, we have to discuss.
Just to talk a little bit about the that I didn't mention in the beginning, Brazil has been pretty much involved with this agenda since 2019. Consider that I'm referring to the blue economy. So around 2019, 2020, that is being coordinated with the Ministry of Economy, that is with the CIRME, that is the Commission Interstate of Marine, and is also counting on the Brazilian Institute for Geography and Statistics to create, first of all, a concept, because we don't have a concept. What is the economy of the sea or the blue economy of Brazil? Because blue economy and the economy of the sea is not a tangible concept. If I talk about GDP, GDP is the same anywhere in the world. Everything that was produced in the regions during a certain period. If I talk about blue economy, the United States has one definition, Europe has another, Italy has its own, China has its own. So this technical group in the Brazilian case is talking not only about to create the official concept, but also to create a measurement, like to say, for example, to Brazil, what's the weight of the sea, for example, to generate employments and things like that. So there's only one thesis in the middle of the several PhD theses about that, to see the impact of the sea and the economy of the country. So when I see that this is very new, it's really very new. We have only one thesis that was defended in UNB about that, you know. So for example, you don't need to be in the coast to be worried about the relevance of the sea and the season of the ocean, you know. Because without international marine transportation, even an international city cannot be accessed. I don't know if you do not know, but in the official data, 90% of the transportation in Brazil is sea transportation. So this is advancing, and BNDES together with the Brazilian Marine is starting to studying about having public biddings, so to have this planning like a spatial national planning that includes marine economy. So we're going to have funding from BNDES to have studies to make the implementation of public policies more feasible. And I'm not talking about public players when I say that. So for us to design a strategy of the Brazilian development based on the sea. So it's going to start with a project uh, uh, in the sea. So there are a lot of things to say, but for those that are also attending, I don't know if you know, I'm going to give on to Williams now because all the reflections that I was making as I came here, so how to get close with this challenge of communicating and taking to the society this idea of blue economy. I don't know if you know that Brazil, after here in Brazil, after the most consumed drink after water is coffee. And I passed by Bolsa do Café, and I think that this has also to do with climate changes, blue economy, these variables, because they all affect the most consumed beverage in Brazil, that is coffee. If we, since we have a predictable ocean, how does coffee connect to the ocean? So I wanted to use two scales of time. I like this reference of about coffee because all the meteorological and climate issues have a lot to do with coffee and its production. So, for example, the rains that there were in São Paulo, there was a very nice booming for coffee and all that. So these conditions of what is happening in terms of time scale, that is, like I said, for example, the temperature of the ocean, El Nino y La Nina, brings a condition that is going to impact if the production of coffee is going to be one way or another. Coffee is a commodity, so it impacts in the price of the coffee. So for example, at Climatempo, we have a panorama of what's going to happen in terms of climate changes that is going to impact in the price of coffee. So the stock market in New York, so I wanted to look at that at another scale. I want to think about climate and thinking about the coming in the next years and decades. Several studies show, like for example, Imbrata is a very good example, as they've been working on the different scenarios for climate forecasts. Will interfere in issues not only production and in climate changes, but also in the climate zone. So all this harvest, probably in 40, 50 years, the meteorological conditions where I plant coffee and all those things are not ready for that. So there is the use of seeds and genetic changes, but the way of the climate is going to be more significant than going after technology to be able to maintain or improve this. Remember that I said that we need to improve production in the coming years because we have a challenge to feed millions of people. So I saw a strategy that will make us think a little bit I don't know if I can say that. For example, you have, for example, Café Pelé. Maybe in 30, 40, 50 years, you will arrive to the supermarket and you will buy Maradona coffee. Because here in Brazil, we will have less conditions to have this agricultural productivity. But on the other hand, the northern of Argentina, it will show that it will be more prone for you to produce coffee. So it's something for us to think, because in some decades, this social economic balance that we have connected to agriculture, be it a family agriculture, it can suffer very significant changes. So going back to coffee, we have in the southern part of Minas, it's pretty much based on the culture of coffee, but this Embrapa studies, regardless of the scenario, be it the most optimistic or the most pessimistic one, it for it you will have more warming or less warming, but no matter what, you will have a reduction in the areas of coffee plantation. So it's another issue that we need to bring, so that we need to discuss, because we need to
And going back to the beginning, it has to do with our daily coffee. This is a very important observation. So, and this is an important connection for this proximity that result in things that our daily life, as taking a coffee, they will and they are already being altered. Fabiana, I will skip a little bit and get this pigtail on what William said, because the transport sector also depend on this variation of if there is a change in commodities production, you have to consider and predict that in the transport sector. Yes, that's true. In the particular case of hidrovias, our operations in Brazil, we navigate in regions that have very different diagnostic projections. In the Amazon, there will be an increase of water due to the increase of rain. In Paraná, Paraguay, probably we will have a reduction of the size of the boat that I can put in the load because of the decrease in water level, in water height. So yes, we have, and there is for operations, and not only for Hidrovias company, but all the players in the area that work in Paraná, Paraguay rivers that are historically very well used, the region of the Amazon and Paraguay Chaco, they developed through navigation. Even from the indigenous peoples, we just developed something that already existed. When we look at that, it is important that companies understand too that includes to include climatic variation in the management of the company, in the management projection of the company. We cannot, this is important for, climate is important for my business and for any other operation. In Santos, there are prognostics and more pessimistic scenarios of a high increase in the sea level. And everybody that operates in Santos port, there is a risk, a physical risk to the operations and the facilities of the company. We have to take this into consideration in the planning of the company, so we can talk to the investors and tell them that in fact our business are capturing this variable. So it is summarizing, it is no longer possible to do business without thinking in sustainable management in the long run and without capturing the climate variation in the next. If we just consider the next harvest, the next crop, the next quarter, we will live for now, but we will get lost within time. This is true for municipal management, and this is true for private sector. Thank you, Fabiana. Eduardo, will finish this second round with you before our final remarks. In this challenge, we heard of predictions and so on, and in terms of public management, your work in the political time uh, allow for projections for 4 years. But as you work with something that is much bigger, that is a public management with predictions and solutions and thinking on the long run, how it is necessary and how key it is in the life of society. Thank you, Paulina. Well, how do we work with whole understanding, passing through everything they said in the local sphere? Well, what happens? There are different perspectives, different standpoints. We see different scenarios being exposed. And, well, most of them are not positive due to this emergency. And at the same time, working with local studies and local master plans. When we say local, we have the global mapping, and we bring to local scale, and we do a precision, and we convey this information for the city manager to plan, or the policymakers. And so both in the climate change as in the plan for the preservation of the Atlantic rainforest, we map protection and green areas, green corridors or ecological corridors, and air corridors. Another very important topic are the springs, the water springs. And when we have the information of spring mapping, we pass this information and the risk of social environmental vulnerability in these areas. And in the Mata Atlântica, or the Atlantic Rainforest mapping plan, this economic growth, this need of growth has to be considered, but has to be sustainable. So that at least consider these polygons of springs. We have a risk of decreasing our water reservoirs and our water production, and because of the watershed, so it makes no sense work on top of springs. This will be foolish. We would be swimming against the current. So this is what we try to do. We try to put the climatic we try to consider this in the plans of the government. As said by Fabiana, the issues of ship navigation, we have to work with the whole size because of the height of the river. The climatic dynamic changed the city of Santos because we live in the São Vicente Island. Everything that happens in one side of the island here, in the other island, Guarujá, will have the same problem. So we cannot act just locally. There's no punctual study. It has to be regional. It has to consider a bigger cutoff so we can propose to the manager. Well, so many challenges. I would like to remember that one of the major objectives of the ocean decade is we leave no one behind. So a debate such as this one, so varied, and that with the help of my colleagues here, we were able to do the connections, is key to promote this dialogue, promote these perceptions, and that they are conveyed and replicated. So I now invite you to the final remarks, and you are free to do your closing as you wish. And I thank your audience, those who are here and those who are watching us through streaming.
So first, I want to congratulate you for bringing this topic here because it's an important discussion. If we talk about global agenda or climate agenda, it's impossible not to talk about uh, the word blue and ocean. You know, I breathe this in the post graduation at the Naval School and in the group of economy of the sea. And we have been very attentive to decade. So one of the ideas of the ocean decade is not to leave anybody behind. And one of the results that we look for is that an ocean that is productive and sustainable. Now I'm going to wrap up giving you some food for thought. And I've been talking a lot about that with my students, that the fact that the official UNESCO documents, when they mention blue economy, they focus exclusively, there's an exclusive focus on the SDG 14. So, but it's important to understand the ocean decade in terms of predictability, productive, sustainable ocean, and all that we look for. The economic perspective needs to understand that it's possible to collaborate much more than only looking at SDG 14. I'm not saying that this is not important, but SDG 14, it talks about life below water. So it focuses too much on life. And ocean, in the ocean you have life and not life resources, and resources of short and long term. So once we're engaged in this decade, it's important to understand that when we look at that for a productive ocean and a sustainable ocean, it includes to the SDG 14 with all its challenges, but we cannot limit only to that, you know? So with that, I'm going to connect with the terminology that Fabiana taught me that is in the DNA of economy, that is long term. The decade is going to start on the 20th and it's going to the 30th. And we need to understand that the decade has a long-term objective. So in these 10 years, we need to call the attention of the global community, international players, banks, funding, the academia, everybody. And we need to call the attention of that to that from society and continue calling their attention. So it's the science that we need for the ocean that we want. And what is the science we need, and what is the ocean that we want? It's an ocean that is productive, sustainable, that generates revenues, income, and that serves society, and that can allow us to create a symbiotic relationship between the environment and human beings. So who has affected us first? We, creating critical structures in the shore, or it's the increase of the level of water in the ocean, that impacted. So we need to have a long-term vision. The short term is also important, but we need to have the long-term perspective to bring the ocean into the agenda and put in our scenarios and model that and include this in our governmental strategies so that it can be lasting in the agenda and inside ourselves, right? because oxygen, the climate regulation, all this depends on the ocean. Williams, please, your final words. Well, once again, I would like to thank for the invitation for the Trade Association of Santos that invited us. It's so crazy to see how much such a diverse group, can be connected, So it's now much more clear that these concerns are of all of us, the academia, of the private sector, the public sector. So the message I wanted to convey here, and I don't know if I'm going to be a little repetitive, but is to talk about the concern about the things that are ongoing already, the changes that are undergoing. We have studied and we can have some divergences related to different scenarios, but an important point that Eduardo mentioned was that the swells that happen here in Santos that are more recurring. And I did not mention here that the average global temperature is more than 6 degrees above the average, but more than that, the effects that we see globally is the biggest frequency of severe events. I'm not saying that summer is going to be hotter or winter is going to be colder. I'm saying that I'm going to have more severe snow, drizzles, more severe, the events will be more intense. I will have peaks of warm weathers that I have never seen, extreme colds that have never been registered before. This year, for example, since the beginning of autumn until the beginning of spring, we had cold weather in the end of May, very relevant with snow. So it's more and more a concern of the public sector that is the biggest, highest frequency of events that is pretty much connected to the day-to-day of society. So I wanted to wrap up with this comment to say that the climate changes within Climatempo, we've been taking this very seriously, not only to agribusiness, to energy, but for infrastructure as well, is what we want to be more engaged as a society, bring this problematic, discuss this as we've been discussing now as a society so that we can be prepared. I know that it's hard to talk about reverting a situation, but maybe we can be more aware and see that as a society, I believe pretty much in human beings, and I think that human beings can adapt very easily to understand the problems and take advantage of that. So I trust that regardless of anything, we are preparing. So conversations like this make us from different sectors of economy be more prepared for some things that, like I said, are already going on. I'm learning a lot. I hope you as well. So, Fabiana, I'm going to invite you because I'm going to leave our host to the end. I'm going to be brief, Paulina. We talked about long term very much. At Hydro Ways, we talk about journey a lot, and we like to say that nobody can be sustainable alone. So the invitation that I bring here and the provocation looking to the private initiative, to my niche, is that we need to look carefully to our business ecosystem, understand this business ecosystem, and understand that such as sustainability, ocean governance is not done alone. We need a team to do it. Okay, Eduardo, let's wrap up this table. We need to be more resilient in facing this challenge. I know it depends a lot on the work of the private sector, so different sectors that are participating in a society that is aware and well informed. So, yeah, Paulina. Well, regarding the local scope, with the understanding of all these spheres, how do you balance that and have an understanding of all these sectors and transform this into a law, into a bill of law? So the Pact of Climate Actions of Santos has a development every 4 years. So we have the short, mid, and long term. So the midterm with international regulations of SDGs, of the 2030 agreement, and 2050. But of course, and annually we will update this information with new data, with more accurate data. Sometimes we advance in one or another sphere. But the most important thing that we try to work on is, like we say, it's on nature-based solutions. So solutions based on nature and taking advantage of the ecosystem services that the nature provides us with, like the shade of a tree. So, for example, I'm going to do a suppression of an area, and then I'm going to be trying to look for solutions to let that area more comfortable, less warm. So there is that issue regarding consensus, like try to work with the nature again, but work with nature in our favor, not against us. So with the Atlantic forest, with the rainforest, we thought about that. Mont Serrat is the only mount that we cannot reach by car. So you go, but we have to reach there walking. So how to work on with this issues like the ecosystem-based adaptation, solutions based in nature, and we've been trying to internalize uh, with other peers and other technical people and colleagues from our region. So we end up getting together, being municipal meetings in other spheres, but working a lot in this sense. So solutions based on nature, and you talked about rainforest, so it's the Atlantic Ocean. So I would like to thank Williams from Clima Tempo for the participation. And thank you, Fabiana. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for your participation. Thank you for Rose and Uzo, and for those that attended us. And continue until Friday. I hope you have a long and varied agenda in this ocean literacy dialogues. Thank you very much and have a great afternoon.